Gundam.tk presents Master Grade Gundam Mk-II. Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Robert184, 2Rs, 2Bs from YouTube and Gundam.tk. I'm taking a look at Zeta Gundam's Gundam Mk-II, the first lead from the first sequel, and yes, this is the version 2.0. Time to take a look at the individual parts and weapons. I should start this off by mentioning that I've never built the original Master Grade Mk-II, or its Titan's variation. So when I'm looking at the version 2.0 and comparing it to other kits from around that time, but already just looking at the legs, things are looking pretty good. You're going to be plugging the hips into a ball joint there, and they're going to, just the fact that they look round seems like that may help, although I don't know how much because this doesn't really open up here at the top. But it's the bend that's the most impressive part about this. If you watch the thigh, that is going to split. You'll notice that the knee moved here, so you've got a two-part moving knee there. You're almost going to get a 180. It's more than sufficient, and the gray that shows through looks good. And what do I mean by that? Well, the main part is this mesh piping on the back. And I think this is a touch that more Gundams could use. The Mk-II uses it to full effect. The gray, the color matches the plastic almost identical. You're not going to see it unless you're looking for it, but when you see it, you say, wow, that adds a really interesting texture to the whole thing, and the fact that it can bend and stay out of the way is a real winner. Little other bonuses like this, the fact that you've got yellow around a gray part, old school stuff, would have a lot more trouble doing that. Not the easiest thing to line sometimes, but if you'll notice that there are lines, it's not so much lining all over the place as it is just these little tick marks, and so if you go in there with a gray or a black marker, I'm sure you can have a good effect. Other gray tips down here on the feet themselves, which is looking great. The feet and heels move separately, which is always a bonus on newer kits. This ankle protector isn't going to get in the way, but if you look underneath, check that out. You've got chrome piping under there. So far, well worthy of the 2.0 designation. The waist section is looking good from first impression, but what I really like about it is on the back that you have this bazooka mount. And if you see robots fighting in space, which yes, isn't very realistic, but it's still nice to have the realistic touch that when he throws away his beam rifle and pulls out a bazooka that it comes from somewhere, and that's reflected in this Mk-II version 2.0, as it should be. So the bazooka fits in there and it actually clips in really well, stays in there pretty securely. Close that up and go about your daily business. Here again, just that really tick marking instead of lining, I'd call it there. And as you move on to the front, these side skirts are just on a regular pivot there. And the front skirts move independently, but it's inside where you'll notice that this part, you can slide it forward or back. Not too easy to pull them forward, but it is possible, and they even show you a few poses in the manual where you may want to use this, especially when he's down with the legs apart and he's pulling out the beam sabers. Just push to get those back. The front is pretty simple on first impression, where you've got some lining in there that I could have done better or clean it up a little bit. But it's again just these little tick marks all over the place that just add a sense of realism to this. Then you've got this part up here for a little bit of color, if you want to call it that, and then here you've got this part, big ball joint that you're going to put this in, but the fact that this can move around, I wonder if that's going to come into play later. As a final bonus, if you're taking your bazooka into battle, you may as well take some extra rounds, and those are going to just fit in and slide down here on the side armor. Again, some nice realistic touches. I never paint my figures, so I guess that's why I forget to show them off, but yes, you've got a cockpit that opens and it's going to have Camille, or Emma, I suppose, inside there. It's actually Camille in this case. But here you're going to have a very interesting looking chest, and for me it's the colors. This has really gotten away from the old Gundam blue and gone with this more navy look. When you combine that with the bright yellow, orange, and the red here, I think this is one of the more unique chests, and I actually really like the color scheme, and it's something that when the new and similar Gundams later on have done, I'm a big fan of. Considering this is the second one, I guess it goes back pretty far in their history. Now, when you're looking at the actual moving parts, you've got two parts here. The head is going to fit on here with a ball joint, so at least it's got some movement there. And the shoulders, what can you do with these? Well, when you take a look, you can move them this way, but you can also bend them up a little bit, and though it's not necessarily the most attractive way to do it, the fact is that you can get a lot more mobility than you would with an old school model. The shoulders don't have any moving parts, you're just going to plug that in, and then you've got white parts around a white part with some yellow, orange on the inside. Some lining that again could be better, but the fact that you've got some yellow showing through there, and again those tick marks, I noticed that this seems to be a common theme here for the Mk-II. I'm liking it so far. Cool touches for the arms, where again you're going to have that non-white color up here, which is a good thing I think, and then the bend mechanism, always important. No problem getting the near 180. I also like the fact that it's got this part that can bend, so you can have the arm actually come up a little bit, or look like it's going to come up because you've got that dynamic point there. Down for the forearms, there's absolutely nothing exciting there. Again, you just got those tick marks all over the place, a place to put in the shield, and the manipulators, nothing too fancy, 3-finger trigger finger split. You could split those and make them individual if you want, but they do have that bend point down there at the wrist. Again, worthy of the 2.0. Not quite worthy enough to do a full thumbs up though. The backpack is one of my favorite features of the Mark II just because it does something that I wish the earlier Gundams had done, and that is when you take out the beam sabers, you've still got something left. Looks like they're in there and they're actually solid. And the big winner for me is this mesh piping, which I loved on the legs, and it's even more visible here, and you'll notice that you can move these around on a ball joint, but the fact that you've got that piping there, that for me is worth all the extra money. Here you've got the thrusters, and they're individually moving down here. Not a lot of color variation, but this is a different color if you take a look for the backpack compared to the chest. So you've got some variation, and the fact that you've got the white on the darker color there, I think looks great. To the weapons, where you have a similar color here to the backpack, and for moving parts you may be a little bit disappointed. This is going to go up and down, nothing changes here, and this part can go up and down, it's just got a green sticker on there. But these parts here can pop off, even if they are a little bit tricky, and they can be replaced by the extra 2 on the shield. So you've got a bazooka on the back, and an extra one on your hip, and you've got all sorts of extra weapons, throwing the Vulcans on the head. The Mark II comes across as being more realistic than even kits from the 08 MST. Anyway, for the mount mechanism here, I'm pretty pleased with it. You've got this part which is going to plug in, but what's cool about that is that you can actually move this around to different places and position it in different ways on the arm. It looks like you could do something with that, but not in this case. And then, for colors, it's a little bit dull, but in a way that just makes the chest pop out a lot more. I am disappointed that they went with stickers here instead of getting an actual yellow piece underneath, but anyway, they are pretty small, and they haven't peeled off too much except for in that corner. You do have the red here, again the tick marks, and this navy blue. Looks really sharp, but it does have a gimmick to it. If you take this shield and you pop this up, you'll notice that you hear a click, and then you can actually slide this along a track, which sometimes flows smoothly and sometimes not. But yes, you can fold up the shield. Why? I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Hyper Bazooka here just because sometimes on old school Gundams you just get gray. All over the place, gray. Incredibly dull. The Mark II, the fact that it has the variations here, this is the same color as the beam rifle in the backpack, and it's got some gray and white in there, just mixes up the variation, and the fact that you've got a different color at the end, for some reason, pleasing to the eye. And I wish all Gundam bazookas did this, but when you put this in, sometimes it's hard to get this just around the shoulder perfectly, and if this doesn't have a bend point on there, you'll also notice that there's a hole to put the peg in for the manipulators, that you'll be able to get this into the right position, I'm hoping. And this part, not too easy, but it does pop off. Throw in the extra one from the hip, and again, you're ready to fight a really long, well, one-year war. The beam sabers, as mentioned, look good on or off the backpack, and the backpack looks good without the beam sabers on or off. Now, the beam sabers themselves are very small, and nothing exciting there, except for the fact that it does have a hole to keep that in the manipulator, and the fact that by having these square ends, it just looks a little bit more interesting, and again, it looks really good, I think, when it's offset here with the darker color. Onto the display base, where you don't have the ability to slide this forward too much, but what you can do is actually bend everything up here. And I actually have another broken piece in there, and when you put it like this, you can actually pretend that it's stepping off this way. This part should be attached on here, and sadly the broken pieces continue here, because what you'd have is actually an elevator type arm that's going to swing up, and you'd put this base on here where you can actually have people go and be doing all sorts of work, which sadly is also on my to-order list. I think it was in Gundam Sentinel where they sort of said that Vulcans in your head don't make a lot of sense. But anyway, the Mark II sort of addresses that by having these separate Vulcan pods. And, yeah, no, they're not quite pointy. But anyway, I do sort of like this. You've got this sort of chain effect back there. You've got a moving part here, some color there in the red, and you put a seal on there, and I think it actually looks pretty good. And then you would just clamp it onto the head like this. Here's the Vulcan pod on, and I think that it actually doesn't look that great, although when you've got a backpack and a whole bunch of stuff sticking out and big shoulders, may improve my perception of it. But if we're just talking about the head here, the Mark II I think has a fantastic head, and I like a lot of things about it, from the red goatee, good lining channels there. You've got even good channels under the eyes, which you don't always get when you're trying to line those. The red jewel looks good, and instead of having a white one, You've got the nice yellow here. The camera lens looks good. My only complaint being that, again, on newer master grades, probably under these ear type pieces, you'd actually have a gray inner frame that you'd put a white piece on top. So I've just gone through and lined that, and it took a little bit of effort just to get everything just right. There is a fair bit of lines all over the place instead of just these little ticks, but I think that the overall effect is fairly pleasing. My impression from just the parts is really positive, especially when you look at things like the way the legs move and that mesh piping. I've talked about it too much already here on the backpack. I love the way that looks. The fact that the weapons and the ammo packs go on everywhere, the shield, things like the fact that it can move, and that you've got that solid looking chest and a great looking head and some good shoulders. I'm really impressed so far. However, it remains to be seen that once you put it together, how well is it all going to work. So let's see how the MS is and the posing. The version 2.0 is making a lot of promises on the box. Anyway, let's see how it actually pans out. See ya.